Well, good afternoon. Let's try that again. Good afternoon. There we go. I'd like to thank all of you. It's really an outstanding turnout. So I want to thank all of you for being here with us. First and foremost, let me thank IMPD Chief Brian Roach, as well as a cross-section of law enforcement and community activists, neighborhood and civic leaders who are dedicating this afternoon and many other afternoons to help better our city. Let me specifically, because they'll all be, I think, speaking and making brief presentations to you, but I am deeply grateful for the presence today of our newly invested, presidentially appointed, Senate-confirmed United States Attorney Josh Minkler. Mr. Attorney, thank you for being here with us today. Also with us today, FBI Special Agent Ed Wheely. Ed, you and I worked on many cases together back in the day over in Terre Haute. Glad to have you here today. Along with Ed as ATF Group Leader, Patrick Hand. And again, Patrick and I go back a long way. So thank you, Patrick, for being here. And of course, our one and only Marion County Prosecutor, Terry Curry. Thank you, Terry, for your presence today. You know, last month we came together for the first of these stewardship meetings because we know that the decisions we make and the steps that we take to shape a healthy and safer community must be taken together. It involves all of us. It requires and includes each and every member present in this room, and frankly, many who are not here today. And it is in these gatherings where that shape, the shape of a safer community, can be formed. The data that we accumulate and share and will be reported to you today and hopefully will prompt some discussion helps us keep our target fixed on the root causes of crime. In fact, data paints a picture of why we focus today on the illegally possessed firearms in our city. Last year, and I don't want to jump the shark by getting ahead of the data that will be presented to you, but just in summary, last year our officers confiscated 3,200 illegally possessed guns. That's a lot of guns. Of those 3,200 illegally possessed guns, of those 3,200, 2,800 were associated with a crime. 1,700 of them had been previously reported as stolen. This means, I was never really strong at arithmetic, but I think I'm close. This means that more than 100 guns per month end up in hands other than the ones for which they were intended. That is unacceptable. But it is not unsolvable. Over the last 2 months, IMPD has ramped up collaboration with our local, state, and federal public safety partners, all of whom are here today, focusing on efforts on those who illegally possess and end up using firearms in the commission of crimes. Together, we have stepped up our analysis of seized firearms, our analysis of cartridge cases, linking them to other crime cases in real time, and allowing our prosecutorial partners, both at the state and federal level, to pursue enhanced sentencing for those who commit crimes with a firearm. This joint effort has resulted in multiple arrests, confiscation of illegally possessed guns, and even more additional intelligence that will further enable our efforts. But it's not necessary to be a public safety professional to help prevent gun-related crime in our community. As citizens, simple steps such as taking extra precautions to lock up firearms and making sure to remove them from vehicles on the street at night can make a difference, does make a difference, and will continue to make a difference. These steps may sound and feel small, but they are crucial in their complementary effort to the work that's being done by IMPD and our public safety partners to help keep our neighborhoods safe, which is, by the way, why this month IMPD launched the 9 p.m. routine, a campaign to help remind residents to lock up their belongings. Indeed, the more we work together, the sooner we will achieve the progress that Indianapolis deserves and that we all seek. And so here today, we are reaffirming our commitment to doing just that, standing as one city for a stronger and safer Indianapolis. That is our goal, and that is what we shall achieve in working together as one city. Chief?
So welcome. Last time this lasted, Kendall, 63 minutes. I talked for 63 minutes. So we're not going to do that this time, and we're going to try and work through it. We have, as the mayor mentioned, there's a lot of our public safety folks here that will assist and are much more interesting than me. But I want to walk you through some of the data that the mayor just talked about. And then there's others that will be on the program. I want to make sure you don't get the sense, though. Each month we're going to talk about a specific thing, but I want you to understand that we understand that this is a collective endeavor, and we need all facets of whether it's prevention, whether it's education, whether it's law enforcement, whatever that is, we need it. We have a lot of our members of our community councils, our district community councils here. I see Anthony Beverly from the east side with Stop the Violence. I see Darius Ross from the Ross Foundation. So all these people are invested in trying to curb the violence. So I don't want you to get the idea that we think that law enforcement is the only answer. We think it's important that we report to you what it is we're doing. And then towards the end, we have some prevention piece of that we want to share with you. You know who I am. So, Mayor, sorry, we updated it.
That's good. That's a good update.
So it's 3,500 guns, and we still haven't counted and haven't accounted for all of December's guns. So that number is going to go up. It's about 500 more guns than we took off the year before, and the expectation is that number, we're on that same pace this year. Approximately 2,800 of those guns, as the mayor said, are associated with a crime. So that's why we call them crime guns, because they are guns associated with a crime. As the mayor said, there are over 1,700 guns reported stolen. Of those, 1,422 of those were handguns. Most of our homicides are occurring with handguns and our non-fatal shootings. Mayor's math was correct. It's a little over 100 guns reported stolen a month. Here's just a quick graph of that to show you how that's occurred. February and March last year were our down months, but you can even see, November and December, it doesn't stop. And the summer months having our largest thefts. And this is from both larcenies of vehicles and burglaries. So over 1,700 of those. This just to give you just a little idea. So we arrested last year, IMPD in 2017, 328 what we call serious violent felons. So they have committed more than one felony. Of the 328 that we arrested, 328 of them had guns with them during that charge of a serious violent felon. 41 of them, of their guns, were stolen and were taken out of either larceny or burglary. Those 1,700 guns that have a nexus to crime that we talked about, just quickly reviewing those, and that's painstaking. There's no system that does this. 196 of those 1,700 guns I can associate with a crime. Those are just the guns that were taken last year. So it's significant. All of our homicides, out of 154 last year, 136 of them died by gunshot. I'm going to give you, just run through quickly, a handful of cases that were connected with a gun that was stolen with a crime. This is a non-fatal shooting. Jerry Henning, who's 29, he was shot near 42nd and Byram. The vehicle that he was in, we found shot up. There was a stolen handgun inside. He also had narcotics on his person. He was arrested and convicted. Mr. Henning right now has an open warrant. So if you see Mr. Henning, I think Kendale may have a photo of that. So afterwards, if you want that, we can give that to you, but we're looking for him. So he was convicted, but it was apparent that he was firing back and he had a stolen handgun in his car. And this is a gentleman that would otherwise not have a handgun. Marlon Kaiser, 24, stated he was shot inside the residence. As we investigated, it was obvious he was shooting from the inside also, so he was also involved. This is an uncooperative victim. Southwest District, during a search warrant of that same house, located a stolen handgun and narcotics, and they were inside. And that case is currently pending with Marion County Prosecutor's Office. December of last year, Ashley Morris was out on bond for an armed robbery, carrying a handgun without a license and resisting law enforcement. And she's alleged to have used a stolen gun to shoot the victim over a disagreement. So she's in a disagreement, she's out on bond, she has a stolen gun, and she used it for one of our non-fatal shootings. Again, that case is pending with our Marion County Prosecutor's Office. This month, we do a lot of work with our probation, who you'll hear from him here in a moment. But it was our East District Flex team. We look at some of the high offenders list on those that are on probation. We also had some information that Mr. Moore was involved in a shooting. He was uncooperative. So we went to his house and they collected 4 firearms, one of which was stolen, and then an additional amount of narcotics. I tell you that, and the people up here in front are our federal and local and state law enforcement. We couldn't do the work that we do, and we couldn't focus on the guns with the abilities that IMPD has alone. So we've asked them to take part of this discussion and kind of explain to you how we're cooperating and how collectively we're trying to address this. So I'd like to introduce Kevin Riley first, and he's the Assistant Deputy Chief over Probation. You don't need that?
No, just
It's very technical.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Riley. I'm our Assistant Deputy Chief for Juvenile Probation. I oversee our Juvenile Division intake unit and also our field services. We recently hired a Director of Community Safety Initiatives that's been taking part in a lot of the coordinated efforts that we're doing with law enforcement. Overall, our department has about 8,500 adult offenders that we supervise. We have another 1,000 juvenile offenders. 63% of those juvenile offenders are on formal probation. We also have some pretrial youth. Roughly 20% of all of our active probationers are high risk, classified by a state document. Of that, our director went through, and you can click to the next screen, that would be great. Our director went through and picked approximately 80 high-risk gun-related offenders that we're currently supervising. In collaboration with law enforcement, we went out and conducted searches of those offenders. We did 27 proactive searches. 22 of those were actually successful. About 40%, since we like to change behavior, about 40% of those were successful and fully compliant. Unfortunately, for the other 60%, we had 3 outright arrests, We had 3 pending federal cases. One of those was an automatic rifle, and 3 violations of probation are pending. Overall, we confiscated 5 guns, but we also had 2 fake guns. We had 15 knives that we located, over 400 rounds of ammunition, and then also drugs. We confiscated meth, amphetamines, heroin, spice, and also marijuana.
Next, we'll have our U.S. Attorney, Josh Jinkler.
Sure. Good afternoon. Thanks for allowing me to be here. As the United States Attorney, which is the Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer for this district, and we cover 60 counties, we have to set some priorities, not only for my office, but is reflected for the rest of federal law enforcement. And so the number 1 priority that I set under my strategic plan was the reduction of violent crime in the district. The district is set records in violent crime, not just here in Marion County, but also down in Evansville. The one thing I did on violent crime was to reinvigorate our Project Safe Neighborhoods program. From 2001 through 2008, when I was in the office, Project Safe Neighborhoods was the way that violent crime was attacked by the United States Attorney's Office. And that was successful not only nationally, but also here in Indianapolis. So we've reinvigorated Project Safe Neighborhoods for this city. And that first thing I did was to assign an Assistant United States Attorney to each of the 6 police districts here in Indianapolis. So there is an Assistant United States Attorney who has accountability and responsibility for each of those districts to determine what cases. Now, the Assistant United States Attorney there is to work with obviously federal agents, the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, Homeland Security, but also with the local prosecutor's office, in this case the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, to determine what defendants should be targeted for federal prosecution. That's essentially what Project Safe Neighborhood is for this district. So far, and I'm keeping, there's a strong accountability piece to this, where I want to determine not only how many defendants are criminally charged in each district, but does it have an impact on the violent crime in that district. So the accountability piece involves not only how many individuals are criminally charged in each district, but also what is the violent crime impact in that neighborhood. Do homicides go down? Do carjackings go down? Do armed robberies go down? It's a very collaborative approach, working, as I said, with the prosecutor's office, with IMPD, with ATF, DEA, and FBI. And I really have very encouraged by what's happened so far. I know in January, just the month of January, that's the only numbers I have for results so far, 25 individuals were charged in federal court. So I'll be waiting for February's report. And as soon as I get February's report, I'll share that with the chief and the prosecutor's office so everybody knows what we're doing. Just for everybody to understand what are the advantages to federal prosecution, because the federal system, as Congress has written it, has differences from the state system. The first is pretrial detention. For those of you that don't know what pretrial detention is a no bond situation. So anybody that is charged under Project Safe Neighborhoods is eligible for what's called pretrial detention. So far, and I checked the numbers from 2017, if we request pretrial detention, which we do in every case, it's granted 77% of the time. So 77% of the defendants that are arrested federally for a drug charge, for a gun charge, for a crime of violence, don't have a bond set. And what that means is they go to jail, and they go from jail to their trial, to the conviction, and then directly to prison. So that's a large advantage, I think, and that's why I wanted to expand Project Safe Neighborhoods and those prosecutions here. Also, if a defendant is sentenced to prison and does absolutely everything perfectly, they have to serve 85% of their time. That's actually pretty rare for federal sentencings. Most of the people sentenced to federal prison don't qualify for all their good time for whatever reason, so they end up doing 90% of their time. So if they do everything perfect, do what they do, they have to serve 85% of their time. There is no parole in federal court. It doesn't exist. Parole has been abolished. So if you're sentenced to 10 years and everything goes perfectly, you do 8.5 years. That's just a consequence that people should be aware of when they're charged federally. The detention and the prisons are a little bit different. If you're detained, you're not held in Marion County. You're held in Kentucky. Henderson, Kentucky is where our pretrial facility is. So the individuals that are arrested here in Marion County don't show up in community corrections, don't show up on house arrest. You don't see them. They're down in Henderson, so it's tougher to have money placed on their books, things like that. It really almost exiles them from Marion County for committing one of these crimes. So there are some advantages which we are trying to expand through Project Safe Neighborhoods that the consequences will be there. They will be quick, and they will be almost harsh. But what you have to understand is when the federal law enforcement comes into the neighborhoods, it's not going to be a pretty picture for the people that are charged and arrested and go to federal court, and it's not meant to be. It's certainly my hope that people understand that there is a consequence when you're committing a crime, that if you commit that crime with a gun, the consequences will be much harsher, much more sudden, and like I said, it won't be a pretty picture. You'll be exiled from the neighborhood in Marion County where you previously lived, and you won't be coming back for a long time. So that's sort of the thought of what we're doing with Project Safe Neighborhoods, and I think we're going to have some good luck with that. So thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah. Special Agent Ed.
I'm Ed Wheely. I'm the squad supervisor for the Indianapolis Safe Streets Task Force. We are a task force that is staffed full-time with 6 IMPD detectives, as well as a full-time Marion County detective. In addition to that, we are augmented by in the neighborhood of 20 additional IMPD detectives on a part-time basis. They're all federally deputized. They help us out in the long-term cases. And at least probably another 10 to 12 Marion County detectives that help out part-time, and they are federally deputized as well. Traditionally, we have worked the long-term cases that result in the big takedowns. We had 3 last year, 3 takedowns. The most recent was November 17th. We arrested 32 federal defendants and executed in the neighborhood of, I believe it was 41 search warrants. But one of the things we've done, one of the initiatives we've done to try to curb violent crime in problem areas is what we call Operation SAFE, which stands for Selected Area for Enforcement. And it's not that complicated. What we do is we will spend a week in a district, and I rely on IMPD management to direct me where they want us to go. We will team up with the officers assigned to that district. We will respond to calls with them. And we're literally there just as a force multiplier to help them. Oftentimes it results in us drafting up a search warrant. Maybe there's a gun located at a house there was a domestic call on or something. We had parole with us on this last iteration we did. We did several home visits, recovered guns. The most recent one we did was in Southeast District. We were out there for 4 nights in January. And just in those 4 nights, we were able to recover 18 firearms and made several arrests, to include some of which are being prosecuted federally. But as a task force, our goal, we work, violent gangs and criminal enterprises engaged in large-scale drug trafficking in Indianapolis, but our priority is helping IMPD reduce violence within the city.
Pat? Do you have slides?
No. Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Hand. I'm a group supervisor with ATF here in Indianapolis. ATF in Indianapolis, we have two groups, one to cover Marion County, and the other group covers all the rural counties. So I'm just going to deal with our Marion County group. We currently have 6 special agents in the group. We had one recently, so I'm up to 7. Was switched over to my group from the counties 2 weeks ago. I have 5 full-time IMPD task force officers, 1 detective from Marion County Sheriff's Office, and then I have part-time task force officers, 4 of them from the state police and 1 from Lawrence PD. Just going to give you a little rundown on some of the stuff that we're doing to try and combat the gun crime. We are an active partner with IMPD and the Marion County Forensics Services Agency on the Gun Intelligence Investigation Initiative. This is taking a concept that ATF has around the country. It's called the Crime Gun Intelligence Center. We've kind of put a different spin on it here in Indianapolis, in that we are not centralized. We like to think that our work on the firearms investigations begins on the streets with the officers who are recovering the firearms, recovering shell casings. A big part of this initiative is the use of NIBIN, which is the National Integrated Ballistics Identification Network. Marion County Forensic Services Agency has 2 machines that they utilize here in the county. Just to give you an idea, a big part of this initiative that we've been working on with IMPD is to revise some processes on what's collected and what's submitted for examination, and a lot of work has gone into the timeliness of those submissions. So just to give you an idea, from August 2017 to December of 2017, there was 35 leads generated. So we have shell casings that are recovered at a scene that are matched up to a crime gun that has been recovered. So 35 leads were generated for that August through December. Interestingly, with our initiative and changing of processes, we've had 39 leads since January 1st. So that's obviously showing some good improvement. Another part of the intelligence initiative is crime gun tracing. So every gun that's recovered in Marion County is traced through the ATF Tracing Center. That provides us additional leads on where these crime guns are coming from. I have 2 examples of cases, both of which have resulted in federal charges. We had a March 19th, last March 19th, a shooting right up the road here at 42nd and Post. We had 2 shooters. We had 9mm shell casings recovered, and we had 40 caliber shell casings recovered. About a week later, a suspect's arrested with a 40 caliber pistol. Our NIBIN lead brought us back to the March 19th shooting. That lead was generated. We did some follow-up on that. August 2nd of 2017, we had a juvenile arrested, and he was in possession of a 9mm pistol. NIBIN examination done on that pistol leads us back to the second shooter from the 42nd and Post shooting on March 19th. And we also utilized a lot of, we utilized interviews, old school police work, and crime gun tracing to lead us to the possessor of that 9mm. Both of the individuals in this case, both of the shooters were multi-convicted felons. Both of them have been charged in federal court, and when we arrested one of the individuals, we recovered 2 additional crime guns. We had a second shooting back last August down in the Southwest District. The suspect was identified by witnesses. It turned out to be a prior ATF defendant who was out on supervised release. That was on August 21st. On September 1st, IMPD conducted a traffic stop, recovers a pistol. That pistol matches up to the shell casing, so we now have that gun in custody. We were able to charge that individual based on the NIBIN lead in federal court. He's a prior ATF defendant, so he's going back through the federal system. So that's some of the, so we're working on the processes of improving the timeliness that these leads get out to the detectives. I believe Chief Bailey will speak to you a little bit more about the initiative. ATF's a sponsor and actively participates in the Save a Cop program. This is where officers on the streets are trained in firearms investigations to include collecting DNA and prints off of recovered firearms. Their next class is going to be in March of 2018, and we are going to have 3 ATF special agents go through that class, so we are familiar with the processes. We are an active participant in the IVRP process, and as the U.S. Attorney indicated, Project Safe Neighborhoods is back in the Southern District. To date, since January 1st, ATF has opened 34 Project Safe Neighborhood cases, so that's 34 individuals from around the city who are illegally in possession of a firearm, and they will be charged in federal court. We are trying to work with the limited resources we have, a balance of proactive and reactive, the reactive cases being the PSN style cases that we work with IMPD, but we're also trying to have a balance with more proactive and utilizing our investigators. As of January 1st, I assigned an agent and a TFO, just like there's an assistant U.S. attorney assigned to each district. We've assigned an agent and a TFO to each district, and I believe the results are already showing from that. We're getting calls that we wouldn't have gotten in the past. We're being invited out on search warrants where there's the potential for firearms to be recovered. In fact, one of the ones that Chief Roach talked about was on Tier Moore. We are investigating that for potential federal prosecution. And we had a HIDA initiative recently approved that will allow IMPD, it provides funding to IMPD to hire one individual to help with the processes of NIBIN, getting evidence moved to and from the crime lab. And I'll just leave you with, we recently had some enforcement action that we took last week, and I hope to be able to speak about that a little bit further sometime this week. Thank you.
I haven't actually seen what the slides are, but I think they're going to be slides here. Good afternoon. Terry Curry, Marion County Prosecutor's Office. I want to talk briefly about some things that are obvious that we do in our office and some things that are not so obvious. We have a number of prevention programs within our office to hopefully avoid particularly young people getting to the point where they're among the statistics we're talking about here today. We have a program called Project Life. It's an intervention program targeting juveniles who are on probation for gun offenses. The individuals or the organizations that participate in Project Life are listed there. It includes our office, Marion County Juvenile Court, IMPD, Eskenazi Methodist and Riley Hospital Trauma Departments, School of Law, Black Law Association, Black Law Student Association, Marion County Health Department, Ms. Deandra Yates, who is the mother of a gun violence survivor, and Connections Home-Based Counseling. This is a relatively new program, and anecdotally, we feel like it has been relatively successful thus far in terms of, as I said, intervention with juveniles who have been convicted of gun offenses at the juvenile level. To a certain extent, Project Life evolved out of educating kids about gun violence, which is a program we've had for a number of years. It is presented in partnership with Eskenazi Health, and it's available at no cost to schools or any other youth-serving organization in Marion County. It is primarily a twofold message. There's always someone from our office, a deputy prosecutor, who talks about the legal consequences of gun violence, and in addition, there's always a representative from Eskenazi frequently an ER doc who talks about the medical consequences. We have a short video that sort of summarizes the medical message that it's given.
Hello, my name is Dr. Clark Simons. I am a trauma surgeon at this wonderful Eskenazi Hospital. So let me explain to you what I do as a trauma surgeon. So I deal with patients when they come in when they're victims of trauma. That can be secondary to car crashes, falls, stab wounds, or gunshot wounds. Let's talk about gunshot wounds now. So we deal with a lot of gunshot wounds here at Eskenazi Hospital, and honestly, we have a lot of gunshot wounds in the country. The issue for gunshot wounds is that when a person gets shot, anything that can happen. Most people who get shot, honestly, they don't die. But most people who get shot have significant injuries secondary to being shot. The issue for gunshot wounds is simple, the guns. And so for you all, think about the consequences of guns. You know, you're going to talk to a lot of people, you're going to hear from the judges and the sheriffs in terms of what the legal complications of guns, but I want to talk about what are the medical consequences of guns. When a person is shot, anything can be injured. But what happens when you get shot, what's the first thing you think that person's going to think of? You're going to think you're about to die. Reason being, because some of you will die. There's too many young people who are being killed from guns. There's too many young people who are permanently injured from guns. This is a serious thing. I want you all to think about what are the consequences, and more importantly, is it really, really worth it? And so when you come to me, if you ever have to see me, you know, it'll be me and a bunch of other doctors and nurses and so forth who do everything we can to help you get better, but sometimes it just doesn't work. We have a lot of people here, a lot of young people who get shot, who might have a permanent injury. Some are paralyzed, meaning that they will no longer be able to walk again. Some people have injuries to the point where they can never recognize people, their loved ones again. They can't do things that you're used to doing on a regular basis, like playing games or hanging out with your friends, or recognizing your parents or your loved ones or whoever that is very important to you. So this stuff is very, very serious. And so always think about what the consequences are, and more importantly, think about, is it really, really worth it? You know, I'm old, as you can see from my gray hair. I'm from the streets of New York City. So I was born and raised in New York. But things are very, very different back in my day. Back in my day, street gangs were key all over the place. And honestly, when I was growing up, all of my friends, most of them have not survived. I have a lot of friends who have died, who have been killed. A lot of my friends who are in prison. And there's only a handful of us who made it out of the streets of New York. That's why programs like this are very important, to talk to you all about what are the consequences. And more importantly, for you to start making choices. The key thing is try to make the right choice. We all, at some point in our lives, will make some choices where you can go left or right. But sometimes those choices can affect you for the rest of your life. So think about it. Was it really worth it? Thank you.
Obviously, a powerful message, and I'd reiterate again, it's a program that we will present free of charge, obviously, to any school group or youth-serving organization. Just merely contact our office. So I hesitate to go here because I think everyone's eyes are already glazing over from already all the stats that have been read thus far. But just to summarize the sort of numbers that we have at the Marion County prosecutors on the obvious side, and that is prosecuting crime. In 2017, we filed 1,828 gun cases. We disposed of about 1,700 gun cases in the last calendar year. A snapshot of the pending cases as of year end last year were serious violent felon in possession of a firearm, and I need to correct the chief. The chief mentioned it would require a couple of felonies. Actually, to be charged and convicted of a SVF, it would require one prior felony, but a particular designated one in a laundry list of felonies, such as robbery, burglary, violent crime. So if you were previously convicted of any of those laundry list of felonies and then found in possession of a firearm, you're subject to being prosecuted as a serious violent felon. About year end, we had about 372 SVF cases pending. Handgun without a license is a level 5 felony, almost 400 cases, and a little over 500 handgun without a license as a misdemeanor case. In addition to prosecuting those crimes, we also are involved in what's called the Jake Laird Law. The Indianapolis Star has had some stories recently referred to as the red flag law, in which police officers have the ability, if they determine that an individual is perhaps mentally unstable and in possession of a firearm, to actually remove that firearm. Once that has occurred, there is a due process procedure. It is actually a civil action in which we then prosecute the case in terms of establishing that this individual should have the firearm removed from them, even though they were previously lawfully in possession of that firearm. In last year, we had 43 cases of the Jake Laird Law where the firearm was resolved and destroyed, and 3 others where the case was resolved by transferring the weapon to an individual third party who could lawfully possess it. In addition to sort of our traditional prosecution, in the last year or so, we've also attempted to modernize our approach, and one way in which we've done that is form what we call a strategic prosecution unit. And quite simply, what we do through the SPU is to, with the assistance of IMPD and our other police partners, is to target those individuals who are causing the violence in our city, and to vigorously prosecute those cases in any way that we can. We provide our deputy prosecutors with additional background on these particular individuals that we've identified as priority offenders, and we'll use that information to, again, vigorously prosecute those individuals. We work with IMPD and our other police partners in terms of sharing information regarding the individuals that we've identified in that way. In addition, and Kevin Riley touched upon this, we also follow up on those individuals through post-conviction efforts to partner with community corrections and probation to make sure that those individuals are complying with whatever conditions have been imposed as a result of any sentence they receive. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Bailey.
Good afternoon. Forgive Chief Roach with his incorrect statement on the guns. He hasn't been in the rural police for a long time, so. A lot of stuff I'm going to say, Pat covered a lot of it, but I've prepared, so you have to listen to it anyway. So, one of Mayor Hogsett's priorities in order to address violent crime was that all law enforcement agencies work together. Well, I don't think there is a city, large city or small city in the country that's doing it better than we're doing it right here. With our partnerships with local, state, federal partners. It's very strong and getting stronger every day, and we've added some new partners from parole, probation, community corrections, along with our already strong and getting even stronger relationships with those in the community, like Anthony Beverly, who I see back there staring through me, asking me to get this over with. And, projects like IVRP, which we've reinstituted, that help focus our combined efforts on the small number of people in our communities that are responsible for the violence and disorder. This isn't when we hear about violence in 42nd and Post, I think that's unfair to the people that live at 42nd and Post, because the vast majority of the people that live in that area are good people. They want the same things that each and every one of us want, which is to be able to raise a family, to live their life in peace without having to worry about being hit by a stray bullet or something else. So our efforts are focused on the people, the small players in those communities that are responsible for the violence. And then they talked a little bit about our Indianapolis Gun Evidence Intelligence Investigation Initiative. And this is a coordinated effort with our partners listed on the screen above you. One of the big parts of that, as Pat mentioned, was the NIBIN system. NIBIN is the only national network that allows for the capture and comparison of ballistic evidence, which aids in our solving and preventing crimes involving a firearm. Our NIBIN process is faster than it has been. We were able to process and eliminate a backlog of 2,500 guns in just a few months, and now we can process these guns in 48 hours, thanks to the ATF and many other of our partners. And you heard some of the success stories from ATF today. Those are just, they're continuing to come in, and we'll get more as we move forward. Only one part of the initiative is NIBIN. The other part begins with our district officers at the moment they find the gun, treating that gun as a crime scene as evidence. And part of what's made this successful is the development through the ATF and Officer Ron Gray of our gun liaison program. He mentioned it as Save a Cop. This trains officers to treat weapons as evidence, processing them on the scene for DNA, and try to get statements from people inside cars to lock them in so that the prosecution is easier. I think that this process has increased our filings in those cases. After the NIBIN process has taken place, any lead information that's generated is sent to the ATF, and working through the TFOs and the United States Attorney that are assigned to each of the district. Those cases are sent to detectives on the district or in our major crimes area for follow-up, and then working with the prosecutor's office and the United States Attorney, it's determined which is the best venue for prosecution. These partners that are here today that you've heard from, this process and this shared commitment from the mayor, prosecutor, United States Attorney, the chief, and all of you, working together will help us hold those small groups of people accountable who are terrorizing our community and will help make Indianapolis safer. I think the most important part now is what you're getting ready to hear from our community partners, and that's how to prevent our children and our young people from even becoming part of the criminal justice system. And so I'll turn it over to our partners here now.
Thank you very much. My name is Jane Hedin, and I represent a program called Be Smart for Kids. It's a program of an organization called Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, and it is a non-political gun safety program. We focus on 5 concrete actions that parents and other concerned adults can take to keep kids safe and to keep guns out of the hands of children. And I just want to say, first of all, that I feel highly underqualified to be in this room. But honestly, I'm here because I'm a mom and because I care about not only my children, but about all of the children in this state. And when I started to learn some of the statistics about children as victims of gun violence, I just couldn't stand by. And so if you could go to the next slide, please. Children in America are 11 times more likely to be the victims of gun violence than children in any other developed nation in the world. That is a very startling statistic to me. Each year, approximately 1,300 kids are the victims of gun violence in America, and of that number, approximately 300 are the victims of unintentional shootings, where a child age 17 or under has gained access to an unsecured weapon and used it to unintentionally shoot themselves or someone else. An additional 500 children are the victims of youth suicide. And I will just give some Indiana-specific stats here. Data collected by Everytown for Gun Safety in 2016 ranked Indiana as 4th in the nation for unintentional child shootings. And Indiana also ranks 2nd in the nation for youth suicide attempts. So we clearly have a very big problem here in Indiana with these issues. But it's not one that, again, can't be solved. and that is the focus of the Be Smart program. So if you could go to the next slide, please. SMART are letters that stand for very concrete actions that parents can take. The primary action is to secure guns in homes and vehicles. So as we've been hearing about this morning, this can potentially prevent crimes, prevent guns from going onto the street and falling into the wrong hands. But it also can prevent child unintentional shootings, prevent children from accessing guns and totally not knowing what they're going to do. They point it at themselves or at someone else and unintentionally pull the trigger. So this program does distribute free gun locks when we have them available to us through our national office. And we are always trying to get more gun locks. So we have some at the back table if you'd like to stop and pick one up. But we also educate parents about what safe storage looks like. It does not look like putting a gun in a drawer or hiding it on top of a dresser or something like that. A gun that is out of reach is not inaccessible. A study that was performed by Harvard of 300 children in rural Alabama showed that 70% of those children knew where the gun in their home was located, even when parents thought that they did not. And even more startling, 36% of those children reported having handled the gun. So we talk about the difference between a hidden gun and a secured gun and offer parents the tools to secure their weapons. And next slide, please. The other letters in SMART stand for modeling responsible behavior around guns. We talk about not relying on a gun's safety, for example, always treating a gun as if it is loaded, being sure of what is your target, but also what is beyond the target. I recall a case in Brownsburg a couple of years ago where someone was target shooting in their yard, and it was sort of on the fringe of a rural area, and the bullet actually went out of their yard and into a playroom window of a neighboring house. So we talk about things like that, and those are recommendations that come from the National Shooting Sports Foundation. We talk also about asking about the presence of unsecured weapons wherever children play. So this is really about creating a culture change. When we as parents send our kids to other homes to go to a babysitter's home, another family member's home, for playing with their friends, whatever, we really would encourage parents to ask if there are weapons in the home, how they are secured. So we really focus on showing that it is always an adult responsibility to prevent guns from falling into the children's hands. We absolutely do talk to kids about what to do should they ever see a gun, to leave the area, to talk to an adult, and just get out of there and tell an adult. But we also know from research that children may not always follow those instructions, and so we focus on the adult responsibility to secure the weapon. Recognizing the risks of teen suicide. Obviously, there are some warning signs and some risk factors, and I do have a handout on the back table that talks about those. But again, securing a weapon can prevent gun suicide. And studies show that the vast majority of kids, of youth that commit suicide with a gun, retrieve that weapon from their own household. It's at least 80%. And with suicide by gun, obviously the means matter. Suicide by gun is 85% lethal versus other methods of suicide. And then finally, telling your peers to be smart. And that is where volunteers with our organization come in, and we are always, of course, looking for more people to help spread this message. We go out to community festivals and events, and we give presentations to early education facilities, PTAs, PTOs. We go to safety festivals, and we hand out our information and gun locks. And if you know of any place that might be open to having us come and have a table or give a presentation, I'll be available after the program. You can talk to me. And these are all free of charge, of course. We're all volunteers. And so I want to say that even though this program was designed to prevent unintentional shootings and youth suicides, I do believe it can have very important effects as far as preventing gun crimes by youth as well. If a gun is locked up, it is not available to a burglar, or it is not usable by them, obviously. And so I'd like to introduce Deandra Dykes. Just got married last week, so congratulations to her. She is a part of our program, and she also has her own organization she is going to tell you about as well. So.
Good afternoon, everybody. That's my why, my son, DeAndre Knox. I came here today to talk and speak with Jane on behalf of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America about the Be Smart program. So many reasons why we need to be smart in America, and we need to have gun sense and gun sense legislation for our children. But DeAndre is my why. 4 years ago, 4 years and 25 days ago, my son was 13 years old. He was at a birthday party. He was in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. Kids should be able to go to birthday parties and have fun and not worry about unsecured guns getting into the hands of other teenagers. Well, someone got upset and the mom asked him to leave, and within 2 minutes, the house was shot up 22 times. Sadly, my son was the only one injured, but I'm also grateful for that because it could have been another mass shooting right here in our city. 22 bullets, 35 kids, you do the math. My son was the only victim that night. He was shot in the back left of his skull, leaving him very much like what the doctor described in the EKG video, as injured and can no longer do anything for himself except breathe. Actually, and these are various pictures of DeAndre prior to the shooting. He was shot when he was only in the 7th grade, so he did not get to experience much of the things some of us take for granted on a daily basis. The picture on the left is a very recent picture of DeAndre leaving a doctor's appointment. So my son is now a nonverbal quadriplegic. He does not walk, he does not talk. He's been in rehab most of those 4 years of the injury. However, the shot was so devastating to the left side of his skull, which carries speech, activity, putting your thought process together. His rehab has been good, but of course, as a mother, I want to see him walk and talk again. But in 4 years, we have not gotten to that point, but we're keeping the faith. The other picture on the left is just one. I honestly have lost count of my son's hospitalizations. So people do survive gunshots, but it does not mean they go back to being the person that they once were. So we spend a lot of time at Riley Hospital, St. Louis Children's Hospital, for multiple day stays, not weekend getaways, but multiple day stay for various infections in his skull. He has a shunt to release the fluid from his brain. Sometimes that has to be replaced throughout their lifetime. So Dre's had one replacement. He's had about 9 surgeries on various places, from his skull to his ankles to his arms. It's just a life that nobody ever imagines for their child. My son was 13 when he was shot. He was a high honor roll student. He had all A's and 1 B. His high honor roll plaque was delivered to him in the ICU unit while he was on life support, only days after they told me to pull the plug and let him die because he'll never be who he used to be, and that I should not be selfish as a mother and hold on to a child who would be a vegetable. Well, as you can see, my son's not a vegetable anymore. However, he was for 37 days. He was a vegetable. He didn't do anything but move his left toe. So I'm just here to say that allegedly, a 17-year-old got hold of a handgun, allegedly, because our case is still open. He got a hold of a handgun and made a very bad decision that altered the life of who I say was a perfect child. I'm his mom. In my eyesight, he was a perfect child. He took away every hope, every dream that my son ever had. He wanted to play football like most boys his age, but if he couldn't play football, he wanted to be a firefighter because he was so into bringing joy and saving lives and touching people's lives. And I am grateful today that DeAndre is doing exactly what he set out to do. He's touching lives, changing lives, and instilling hope into this current generation. But at the same time, there are so many things that we can do, as simple as storing our guns safely, so that there are not more mothers like me having to give these talks, having to show these pictures, having to do hospital visits, having to not know. My son right now is in 24-hour care because he requires that, so he's in a facility. At any moment, I can get a phone call that says you need to get to the hospital. Dre is sick, we don't know. About 3 weeks ago, I received one of those phone calls, and the nurse told me, your son's a mess. I don't know if he's gonna make it. This is a reoccurring part of our journey of healing, is not knowing from day to day if my son's gonna live. And there are so many other mothers that have a different testimony. Their sons and daughters did not make it. They did not make it. So I visit bedsides, these other moms visit gravesides. And I just have to say, I commend the efforts and the statistics that I have seen today and the improvement. Because as a mother, there are some times where I feel like I have lost hope in our justice system because my case has been unsolved for so long. And I meet so many other mothers who feel like they are losing that same hope because they're not getting answers and things. So I'm really grateful today for the stats that I see, for the efforts that are improving in our justice system. But I just want to say to everybody, don't think it can't happen to you. Every day we're seeing where schools are being shot up. You should never send your kid to a school and they not come back to you. I should never have sent my son to a simple birthday party of a 15-year-old. He wasn't at an under 21 club. He was in a nice residential area on the west side of Indianapolis. I should have never got a phone call that your son has been shot in the head, Deandra. Get to O'Reilly Hospital as soon as you can. So we all can play a major, major part in changing and touching lives, and at the same time, being smart. Thank you.
Impossible to follow that, the voice of a mom, but I'll do my best. So we're down to the end of this. This is really my one slide. But hopefully you'll see the importance of it. So, Community Engagement Office, which is championed and led by Major Lorenzo Lewis and his team, they presented Eddie Eagle gun safety for over 550 youth in 2017. It's a great program. If you've ever seen it, it really captures the kids' attention. And I believe when Eddie comes out in his Eagle costume and stuff, I think the message is there, and I think it stays there, which is important. Celebrated 18 gun safety poster contest winners at 5 different IPS schools. Another great event to see if you haven't seen it. So 18 winners, but hundreds of students that participate in this. And if you've ever seen it, their posters are quite imaginative. The great thing is, I believe they're drinking deeply of what they're learning, and they're going to stay with it. Along with those things, sometimes there are narratives that go with it that they have the kids tell, and some of them have seen this up close and personal. Some of them haven't, but they're all very powerful. Over 70 youth gun safety presentations in 2018, so I imagine some have started, but that's what we'll have at the end of this year. It truly is important that we make these connections, especially with the youth, obviously, because they're the ones seeing this. They're the ones that are going to deal with this in the future. We want to make sure that that message is certainly not lost on them. And to be honest, when I've spoken to these kids in the past, the goal really is for them not only to tell their friends, but to encourage their parents to listen to what they're saying, especially as it comes to, keeping weapons safe. The next slide really is a website that you could go to offer some ideas and some encouragement in some ways. But great programs. We're looking forward to continuing that here in the future.
Well, thank all of you all who participated. I think if you'll take away just a couple things. One is the last part is prevention. I don't know that we could have had two people better here today to talk about that. And there are opportunities, whether it's IMPD, whether it's the EKG program, and whether it's Ms. Hadeen or Ms. Yates. Please reach out to them as community members as you see that and you see that need. And you want people to come to your community meetings and talk about gun safety and prevention. That ability is here. March, we'll talk about community resources. I introduced, we've got Anthony Beverly and Darius Ross and some of the community councils. Next month, we're really going to focus on what is it that the community can do and what is it that they are doing. And I know this is off topic real quick, but seeing you here, Anthony, is there anything you want to say about what's going on the east side very quickly?
Thank you, Chief. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Anthony Beverly. I'm with Stop the Violence in Indianapolis. There's several things that are taking place, especially on this far east side of Indianapolis. And we see that, we have a lot of law enforcement pieces that are taking place, but I really want to highlight a few of the guys that are taken to the streets that are trying to bring these guys out of a life of crime and get them to a place where they are not committing these crimes. I would say a high number of these guys that are engaged with this violent activity, they don't want to be there. So we have to ask the question, why? Why are they doing what they're doing? And so part of that community resource piece, I think, will help fix some of that. But there's one guy here in particular that I want to really call out, D. Ross, if he will stand up. I want to point him out because he was able to bring several of these guys together and have a sit down with them and ask them that question, why? And when he asked them the question, why, they began to share with him, it's tough. I didn't graduate high school. I didn't have a family history. I didn't have a father. And all of those things rolled up. You immediately begin to explode and you do what you know how to do. Well, D. Ross was able to bring those guys together and have that conversation. And so as a result of that, in January, on this far east side, we had a total of 6 homicides on this side of town, 5 of them at the 42nd and Post Street area, and all of those guys pretty much knew each other, but they also knew D. Ross. And he's a perfect example of what you can do when we invest into our young people. D. Ross used to be one of those guys, but now he's leading the effort to change them around. So we've only had, in the last 30, 40 days, no violent murders on this side of town because of the effort that he's doing, along with many other young guys that are working with him. And we're looking to do the same thing throughout the city of Indianapolis. So thank you again, I appreciate that, and we want to keep investing in our young people.
Thanks, Anthony. It really is a collaborative effort. Are there any questions about to these smart guys here on the front row that maybe you saw in the slide and a little additional information that you have or would like? Yes, ma'am.
One question that comes to mind immediately is what happens to the guns that are confiscated?
So those get turned over after we initially try and find the owner. If we can't find the owner, then it goes back to our property room, and then there's a system to get it to the Marion County Sheriff, and then he destroys them. It's by statute. Anyone else? Well, thanks for being here. March, we're going to... Oh, that's right. There are several booths back here. Byron, sorry. Several booths back there. Please stop by. We appreciate Cafe for allowing us to be here. So thanks again, and we'll see you in March, and we'll talk a little bit more about the stories that Anthony shared with you.